Every day, Angola pumps over 1 million barrels of crude oil from its offshore fields.
This makes it one of Africa's largest oil producers.
Yet for years, much of the fuel used inside the country arrived on ships from overseas. Angola sold its crude to the world, then spent billions buying back refined fuel.
That raises an obvious question. How can a country with vast oil reserves still depend on fuel imports?
The answer lies in a refining industry that never kept pace with Angola's growing energy needs. For decades, one aging refinery carried almost the entire burden, while demand continued to climb.
As fuel imports increased, so did government spending and pressure on foreign currency reserves.
Processing critical financial data requires speed and absolute accuracy. This is the future of document management, delivered today.
Now, Angola is trying to change that equation.
The country has launched one of the largest refining expansion programs in its history.
And China has become one of its most important partners through financing, engineering, and construction.
But can rebuilding Angola's refining industry finally end its dependence on imported fuel?
But why has China invested so heavily in this sector?
And could these projects turn Angola into a fuel supplier for much of southern Africa?
And China has become one of its most important partners through financing, engineering, and construction. To understand why Angola is investing billions in new refineries today, it helps to look back.
Angola gained independence from Portugal in 1975, but independence did not bring stability.
Almost immediately, the country entered a civil war that lasted until 2002.
Nearly 3 decades of conflict damaged roads, railways, ports, power networks, and industrial facilities.
While offshore oil production continued, because most operations were located far from the fighting.
Investment in domestic manufacturing and refining remained limited.
As a result, Angola built a strong crude oil export industry, but never developed enough refining capacity to process that oil at home. For decades, the country's refining sector depended almost entirely on a single facility.
Investment in domestic manufacturing and refining remained limited.
Although the refinery received several upgrades over the years, its processing capacity remained relatively small.
Today, after modernization work, the refinery has a capacity of around 65,000 barrels per day.
That figure may sound impressive until you compare it with Angola's oil production.
While the country pumps more than 1 million barrels of crude every day. Although the refinery received several upgrades over the years, its processing capacity remained relatively small.
Most of Angola's crude, therefore, continued its journey onto export tankers. Meanwhile, demand inside Angola kept increasing.
After the Civil War ended in 2002, the country entered a period of reconstruction.
New highways connected major cities, ports expanded, and airports handled more passengers. And construction activity accelerated.
Mining projects required heavy machinery that consumed large amounts of diesel.
Public transport systems grew, freight traffic increased,
and private vehicle ownership rose steadily.
Every one of these sectors depended on refined petroleum products.
Since domestic refining capacity barely changed, imports increased year after year.
And the economic logic became increasingly difficult to ignore.
Officials also recognized another risk. Depending heavily on overseas refineries meant Angola's fuel supply could be affected by events far beyond its borders. Global shipping disruptions, refinery outages, geopolitical tensions, or sudden price swings could all affect fuel availability at home. Building more refineries offered a way to reduce those risks. The challenge, however, was enormous.
Modern refineries are among the most complex industrial facilities in the world.
They require advanced engineering, sophisticated processing equipment, massive storage systems, marine terminals, pipelines.
Angola could not complete such projects alone, which is why it began looking for international partners.
That's where China comes in. However, China's involvement in Angola did not begin with refineries. It started more than 2 decades ago, when the country faced the enormous task of rebuilding after the Civil War.
Years of conflict had left much of the country's infrastructure damaged or outdated.
At the same time, China was expanding its economic ties across Africa while searching for reliable sources of energy.
The partnership that followed became one of the largest between China and any African country.
In 2004, Angola secured a $2 billion credit line from the Export-Import Bank of China.
The financing supported reconstruction projects across the country.
And additional agreements followed in the years that came after.
Chinese companies built highways, repaired railways, expanded power infrastructure, constructed public buildings, and upgraded water supply systems.
Many of these loans were backed by future oil exports.
Under this arrangement, Angola continued supplying crude oil while using the financing to rebuild critical infrastructure.
And additional agreements followed in the years that came after. At a time when traditional financing options were limited. As trade expanded, China quickly became Angola's largest export market.
For many years, it ranked among China's biggest crude oil suppliers,
often shipping hundreds of thousands of barrels per day to Chinese refineries.
Although China's imports now cull from a wider range of suppliers, Angola remains one of Beijing's most important energy partners in Africa.
But as the relationship matured, it also began to change.
Instead of focusing only on extracting and exporting crude oil, both countries saw an opportunity
to develop more of Angola's energy industry inside the country.
Refining crude locally would create additional value, reduce dependence on imported fuels, and support its broader industrial goals.
That shift matched China's growing role overseas. Chinese companies were no longer participating only in oil production.
They They had gained experience building large refineries, petrochemical complexes, storage terminals, pipelines, ports. Many of these firms could provide engineering, procurement, construction services, industrial equipment, and in some cases financing as part of a single package.
For Angola, that combination was attractive. Building a modern refinery is not simply about installing processing units. It also requires storage tanks capable of holding millions of barrels of crude and refined products, pipelines linking the refinery to ports and distribution networks,
marine terminals for oil tankers, power generation systems, water treatment facilities, and highly trained operators to run the plant safely around the clock.
Chinese state-owned engineering companies had already completed projects on this scale in multiple countries,
giving Angola access to experience that would have taken years to develop domestically. This growing cooperation set the stage for the country's most ambitious refining projects in decades. Among them, one project stood above the rest. Not because of its size alone, but because of what it could mean for Angola's future. On the Atlantic coast, the long-delayed Lobito refinery was preparing to move from decades of planning toward reality. For years, the Lobito refinery existed more as an idea than a construction project. That shift matched China's growing role overseas.
Lobito, located in Benguela province on Angola's Atlantic coast, quickly emerged as the preferred location. The city already had one of the country's largest deep-water ports, established rail connections through the Benguela Railway.
On paper, the location made perfect sense. Yet the project repeatedly stalled.
Changes in government priorities, financing challenges, and swings in global oil prices delayed construction for years.
The government eventually decided the delay could not continue.